This video is brought to you by friend of the channel Squarespace. Stick around to learn more about how their intuitive website creation tools help people turn their hobbies into careers and dreams into reality.
So we've had a bit of a survival game glut lately with the success of Palworld, Enshrouded, Pacific Drive, and Sons of the Forest just released into 1.0 to glowing reviews. It's clear that the addicting gameplay loop of gather, craft, explore, repeat really resonates with a lot of people, especially with most survival games these days taking strides to alleviate the tedium inherent in that loop, allowing you to instead focus on the sense of discovery that defines this genre. One such game that I expected to continue that trend was this, Nightingale. This is developed by Inflexion Games, a studio founded by a bunch of ex-BioWare developers. With that in mind, I expected a game that takes that streamlined survival formula and combines it with meaningful RPG elements. I was also looking forward to a survival game with a well-constructed, well-executed story set in a unique world that combines Victorian-era fashion and technology with the otherworldly bestiary and magic of the Fey realms. I feel like the core loop of survival games has been more or less solved for a while now. So I thought if Inflexion Games is just taking what already works and adding their RPG expertise to it, they'd be pretty on track to delivering a solid, accessible survival crafter. After 30 plus hours of gameplay, I'm here to tell you, this is not that. I know this is early access, a lot is of course subject to change before the full release, and I really hope they do, because in its current state, I'm more than a little concerned. So a lot of that quality of life in modern survival crafting games, it doesn't exist yet, so all the laboriousness the genre is typically associated with rears its ugly head at every turn. As a matter of fact, that tedium has been doubled down on here, as some baffling design causes the crafting system to become exponentially unwieldy and obtuse as the game progresses. That sense of discovery that defines much of this genre, almost completely absent. Instead of revealing new crafting recipes organically through exploration, you're instead purchasing those recipes from vendors with a currency earned from clearing lame map marker activities. That intriguing Victorian gas lamp setting, as they call it, basically non-existent for the first 25 hours or so, where instead you'll be playing with mere sticks and rocks, engaging in some very crude combat against a very limited range of enemies. And once you do hit that 25-hour mark, things do not get much better. Because as it turns out, this isn't just a survival game, it's also an MMO light, where you'll be asked to join up with players to farm even more currency to increase your arbitrary gear score, just to do everything you've already done all over again. Best way I can describe Nightingale is that it's a survival game and an MMO light that takes the worst aspects from both. This is going to sound harsh, but I actually cannot overstate just how exhausting my experience with this game was. I think the only way to do it justice is to walk you through my journey from start to finish. So with that, let's start at the beginning. Nightingale's setting is quite unique. It combines the tools and fashion of the Victorian era with the bestiary and magic of Fey folklore. The story here is that mankind was given help from the Fey to make great technological leaps and allowed us to construct the advanced Magitech city of Nightingale. But of course, as humans, we got ahead of ourselves, and a strange force known as the Pale then showed up, destroying our network of Fey portals and scattering us across the realm. So now we've got to portal hop our way back home to Nightingale. It starts at this character creator. Characters are very stylized to the point that some may find them goofy looking. Honestly, I don't mind it. I think they've got a fair bit of charm, and there's plenty of options here to sculpt them to your liking, for better or worse. Interestingly, there's this lineage tree where you can create your parents, their parents, so on, and you're also able to pick a backstory. Neither of these things seem to have any impact on the story or gameplay for the moment, really just there for cosmetic purposes. So there is a story here of sorts. While it's certainly more overt in its narrative dressing, I don't feel as if Inflexion Games have really moved the needle at all here when it comes to storytelling in survival games. The main character you'll deal with is this guy, Puck. He's the last remaining Fey, and he is a lot. Mostly he's just here to teach you the mechanics of the game and to spout endless exposition in this sort of long-winded Shakespearean manner. He's currently the only voice-acted character in the game, and man, I mean, no slight to the voice actor, but this guy speaks at like 10 words per minute. I was already tired of listening to him after the first monologue.
If not for Astaroth's decree, this trek would have been as easy as peach pie. We Fae are forbidden from consorting with your kind. And while my amity is yours, it behooves us both to move with caution. But enough prattle.
The perfect word I can use to describe him is this new one I found, grandiloquence. It means a lofty, high-flown style of talking that has a lot of fluff to it, but may lack substance. I think this word accurately describes the other NPCs too. Like Puck, they're really just here to provide more tutorials and more exposition via these text blocks, with nothing meaningful to actually say. There's loads of notes and collectibles out in the world that offer more interesting tidbits of lore, but none of this is enough to deliver a compelling narrative at the moment. The story is, you and everyone else need to get back to Nightingale. Don't expect any cutscenes, much less any character development, just very, very light narrative dressing. Of course, this is nothing new for the survival game genre. They tend to rely more on environmental storytelling, but to be honest, Nightingale doesn't have any of that either. Inflexion Games never outwardly stated that Nightingale would have a narrative focus, but it is a missed opportunity, I think. Given the developer's history, I can imagine them taking advantage of that expertise, carving an identity for Nightingale as the survival game with a well-delivered story. Unfortunately, that isn't the case here, and I found the rest of the game struggles to find a unique angle too. So the core conceit of this game is realm walking. The tutorial will run you through how to open portals between the 3 different realms. You'll get a taste of each, but after that you have to pick one as your home realm and the adventure begins. The idea is that you plant your base of operations here, you construct portals to other realms, and then use the resources and recipes from them to push into the same realms but with increasing difficulty, and repeat that process until you presumably reach Nightingale. It sounds kinda cool, right? I mean, your imagine runs wild thinking about the possibilities of what these Fae realms might offer, what bizarre landscapes and creatures await you. But to be honest, these realms don't feel that different from the usual biomes from other survival games. Instead, they're just divided by a very, very long wait for the portal to open, followed by a very, very long loading screen. So as I said, there are 3 realms here. One's a forest, one's a desert, and one's a swamp. I mean, that is pretty familiar, right? To open a portal to another realm, you need 2 cards. The first one dictates the biome and the second one dictates the difficulty. I initially thought that this second card would like drastically alter the realm. Like the forest card with the astrolabe card would result in a wildly different environment to a forest card combined with the herbarium card, for example. But not really. I mean, the first desert realm I visited looks nearly identical to the higher difficulty one, just with a couple new resource nodes. Each realm is procedurally generated, so you do get different layouts, which does change things up. Sometimes the plants are different colors, and now the boars are bigger and the deer look a little funky, but for the most part, not a lot going on here, at least not by default. The real change comes from these minor cards, which you can use at these Fae towers. We'll get to that later. There are cards that increase material yields, alter the damage scaling, movement speed, and this typically also comes with a change in the skybox for some extra flair. There was this one card I played that turned the realm's gravity low and gave the sky this cool fractal effect, but it also made the trees give me meat and bone, the rocks give me wood, and the animals give me rocks. I mean, that's pretty funny, kind of novel, totally messed up the material economy though, because I never had to hunt for meat ever again for the rest of my playtime. It's a neat system that does give these realms some much needed flavor, but I feel like it's just there to be abused. I mean, it's not as if you're using these cards for survival reasons, since you're constantly fast traveling back to your home realm with little incentive to create bases elsewhere. You basically enter a realm, use a card to modify it if you want, and then get the resources you need, leave, and never see it again. The game does look quite nice. I mean, the foliage is thick, assets are detailed, lighting in particular looks great at all times of day. However, again, I wouldn't say it's anything you haven't seen before, especially within this genre, and it's not just because of the environments. If you were sold on that vibrant Victorian-era setting that combines old-timey muskets and magic like I was, I've got bad news for you. That aesthetic is virtually non-existent for the first 25 hours or so. For the most part, you will basically be playing as a caveman, using nothing but sticks, rocks, and animal hides to survive. Nothing signals this more clearly than the first time you make some clothing. You will shed the dapper overalls and waistcoat given to you at character creation and replace it with rags. But it's time to get to work. You know the drill: chop, mine, gather, hunt. You've got to make sure you're well fed so you don't starve, and also that you're well rested so you don't run out of stamina. You do this by hitting E on your bed. There is no animation for this, it just fills your bar. Speaking of animations, this is what it looks like to fell a tree. You'll zoom around mashing E on every plant and bush you see, and also every rock, every bone, each individual log. There is no auto loot, so yes, you will be very well acquainted with the E key by the time this game is through with you. If you showed me early gameplay and told me this was Rust or Ark or even the Forest, I'd believe you. And in that sense, I think Inflexion games have failed to deliver a first impression that stands out among the many survival games we've had before. But uh-oh, you're encumbered after picking up like 10 stones, so now it's time to build a home. Now, for what it's worth, the building is actually something Inflexion games have implemented quite well. You can just start building whatever you want with the schematics you've got, placing down foundations, walls, stairs, delete and rearrange them as you like, and it'll all sit there as a sort of blueprint. It's not actually tangible yet, but all you need to do is feed it the required materials, and as you do so, it'll auto-construct what you've placed down. This is really cool, I think. It allows you to properly envision the entire structure prior to having the resources and freely experiment before committing to the layout. It even tells you the exact cost of what you need to fully realize these plans, so there's no need for guesswork or napkin math to figure it out. If you change your mind after the fact, you still have to manually tear down the parts and you're only refunded half the materials, which sucks, but otherwise it's a really elegant building system with a vast range of tile sets to play with, so I'm really keen to see what people do with it. That quality of life is not present in the crafting though. Oh my goodness. So to start, the UI for just about everything is not good. There's a reason all of the trailers completely hide the UI. Clearly, it's all very temporary, and look, I get it. This is early access. I can deal with giant, garish UI with unappealing font choices, whatever. What I can't deal with is when this temporary UI stuff directly impedes on gameplay. So as with all crafting games, you're gonna pick up a lot of materials. Here though, it's not just a lot. It's like a lot. I mean, there's gotta be over a dozen different kinds of metal, meat, bones, wood, so on. The thing is, many of these right now share the exact same icon. There is also no way to label your storage at the moment, so it becomes an absolute nightmare to navigate your chests, hover over each individual item, trying to find that tier 2 tuft of grass and hollow metal ingot, whatever that means, and you have to find it because the crafting stations do not use any of the materials from your storage. Worse, some of these materials are basically the exact same thing, but they can't be stacked or used together. Like, I have all these different kinds of bones that are within the same tier, but some come from boars, deer, bears, wolves, and so on. Now that might be obvious to you. You might think, well, that's because the wolf stuff crafts wolf armor. But no, they're all used for the exact same recipes. The only reason they're separated like this is because every single material adds a different minor stat increase to the final craft depending on the source. So like the boar bone, for example, might give you 5 more max HP. I understand it's trying to fuel this gear game or whatever, but there's got to be a better solution here. Like maybe the bones stack, but there's a drop down to select which type you're going to use or something. Right now, it is far too meticulous. Inventory management becomes so frustrating, and the gear game it's driving doesn't feel at all impactful enough to warrant it. Next item, the stations. I want you to take a look at my crafting area after 30 hours with the game. It is a total mess, and this isn't even the full extent of what you might need at the endgame. Apparently, it's not enough to have to build specific refining stations to use those materials at a specific crafting station. On top of this, there are these augmentations, which are these sort of decorations that you need to build near all these stations to allow them to craft certain recipes. But keep in mind, you also still need to get those recipes before the augmentations actually allow you to do anything. Each of these stations also have a max limit of the number of augmentations attached to them. So if you want access to more recipes but your stations are full, you're going to have to build an entire new workstation in a different area of your home with those other augmentations attached. Not to mention that with augmentations, the recipe list for each station gets so bloated. Like my smithing hearth has over 40 recipes in here. I remember Valheim introducing this augment system as a way to sidestep having to constantly upgrade all your stations. Here, Inflexion games have double dipped because you need to do both. It is a Russian nesting doll of arduous crafting all the way down the line, bloating the process out of control. It is just an absolute headache to navigate, and you really feel it when you're like crafting your first gun and you've done this laborious process for 3 of the 4 parts. Then you find that the last component requires a new version of a crafting table with a specific augment attached, which requires a new version of a refinery to build, which then needs a new type of ingot you don't have, so you've got to upgrade your pick to mine some new ore, and God, just as I said, complete nightmare. To its credit, there is an in-game glossary that allows you to search for specific recipes and track their components, which is nice, but clearly a lot of work needs to be done here to streamline the process. So all this gathering, building, and crafting, it's obviously all very familiar, and in some cases even more obtuse than I expected. In between all that though, you'll be exploring the Fey realms. Surely they've found some innovations here, given that discovery is at the heart of what makes survival games so compelling. Well, yeah, I don't know about that. It's a little difficult to talk about discovery in this game because, in simple terms, there isn't much of it. At the very fundamental level, you'd expect that by traveling to a new realm and looting a new material would unlock a bunch of new recipes. This is not the case. Get this, okay? So recipes in this game are not discovered through exploration or experimentation. They're instead bought from a vendor. What are they bought with? A currency called essence, which you can get by completing lame, uninspired side objectives randomly dotted around each realm. These activities include activating 3 pillars in the right order, pressing E on 3 glyphs in a 5-meter radius, or the most exciting one, killing like 5 goblins. But there's also those Fey towers I mentioned, which are just a couple floors of doing what I just described. And once you reach the top, it'll reveal the locations of all other activities on the map. But there are also quests that reward essence. What do they involve? One of them is to just get materials to help build some dude's house, and the other one is just to defend a bunch of NPCs from a few waves of baddies. The only benefit to these is that you can also then recruit the NPC to be your companion, but given that you can only have one and there doesn't seem to be a good reason to switch them, I just stuck with my best friend Bess. Once you've got the essence, how do you know which vendor to go to for what recipe? Well, if you open up the glossary, you will see an enormous list of all the traders in the game, and you can click through them one by one to browse their wares before you open a portal to their realm and run 500 miles to get to them. I mean, that is just wild. It really kills any sense of discovery, and I cannot fathom why unlocking recipes was done this way. It was also a shame to realize these realms haven't been designed around those minor cards in a way that would allow for interesting puzzle solving. It would have been interesting for these realms to have unique challenges, ones that would require you to think outside the box a little, you know, maybe cards that let you walk on water to get into some cave, or shrink your size so you can squeeze into some little nook. It'd gate the content in such a way that it'd require specific cards, and that could have led to some organic progression that would feel at home within this magical setting. Unfortunately, Inflexion Games opted for a different kind of gating. In order to unlock those difficulty modifier cards to progress, you need to complete these dungeons in your home realm. There's 4 of them here, and I came upon one as I was exploring because it wasn't marked on the map. I noticed that the entrance was pretty high up, and I tried to use my climbing picks to make my way up to it, but couldn't quite manage. That's when I remembered the low gravity card. So I went over to the Fey Tower, plugged in the card that reduced my gravity, and great, now I can jump high and I can climb. So I went back to the dungeon, managed to jump high enough that the climbing picks would get me the rest of the way up, and then I've made it. Yes, I've gamed the system. What awesome emergent gameplay. Time to go in, and nope. It won't let me in. And I was like, why? Why would it let me in? I've made it to the entrance. Then it dawned on me. It wouldn't let me in because of my gear score. That's right, this survival crafting game isn't so much about bringing the right tool for the right job as it is about pushing an arbitrary gear score number. So this is where the magic totally died for me, and you're introduced to it early on. Puck gives you these quests to guide you step by step through the game's mechanics, and I think they're pretty helpful, by the way, especially if you're not super familiar with this genre. But the first time he pointed me to my first dungeon and the quest popped up saying, reach 20 gear score, I died a little inside. Survival crafting games typically have a very intuitive progression loop. It's a tried and true formula. You mine some copper ore because you need a copper pickaxe to mine the iron ore, and you need an iron pickaxe to mine the gold ore, so on. It makes sense. It keeps you immersed in the world, it encourages you to experiment and to discover the material hierarchy on your own. It is, in essence, just a hidden number, but it's smartly disguised. Here, the veil is shamelessly lifted. You are no longer thinking about materials, you are just thinking about how to make the number go up. It completely pulled me out of the experience, making this feel less of a survival game and more like a grindy MMO with very basic combat. And yeah, I mean, I haven't even spoken about the combat yet, because to be honest, there's not really much to say. As I said, it's simple. There's a basic attack. You can block or dodge depending on the weapon. There's guns, which are self-explanatory, though sometimes you'll reload just 1 round for some reason and have to mash the key to reload more. That's kind of weird. There's also magic, kind of. You can attach a spell to a weapon and they're, fine, nothing crazy. For example, I had one that lit my weapon on fire for a couple of hits, another one that healed me, and another that summons a small localized tremor. There's also crit spots, you can knock enemies down with some weapons. It's, on the whole, okay. Same can't be said for the enemies in this game though. So just to be clear, there is no PvP in this game. It is strictly PvE only, and the AI is not very intelligent to say the least. They all have nearly the exact same behavior, they just beeline straight towards you. They've got like 2 or 3 attacks each, including the bosses. I mean look, this is me fighting a boss at the end of one of those major dungeons. At one point, I realized they simply cannot deal with elevation, like, at all. I thought to myself, I wonder if this applies to the bosses. Turns out, it totally does. I'm barely even trying to exploit the game here, by the way. I'm literally just on the ramp that leads down to the boss room. All 4 of those dungeon bosses, by the way, exactly the same. Only sometimes there's 2 of them. So instead of spending 2 minutes shooting from afar, I needed to spend 4. Honestly, most of the time this exploitation is completely accidental, as enemies just frequently get stuck on objects or just stand in a position where they have no line of sight, but you do. Overall, combat in this game is functional, but barely. I mean, combat is hardly the strength of this genre, but that's because it's often minimal, and because other facets of the game like exploration and discovery are enough to carry the experience. Here, those elements are almost non-existent, and the combat certainly isn't good enough to sustain the amount that you're asked to do. But after about 25 hours of playtime, I thought I had made it to the tail end of this early access release. I completed all the dungeons, I defeated the 3 final bosses to fix this portal that the NPC would take some time to complete. The grind was done, the survival loop was complete, no more realms to conquer for now. And then the portal opened, and that's when I discovered the watch. Maybe I didn't do enough research, but I was kind of surprised to find out what the vision for this game actually is. I knew Nightingale had some MMO-light elements, like it's an always online game, and when you open a realm you can set it to public, meaning anyone can randomly load into it. I ran into a few people doing this. It didn't add much to the experience, but it's kind of neat if you don't have friends to play with. I did think that the gear score thing was very weird to have in a survival game though, but now it all made sense. So after about 25 hours or so of playing mostly solo, I arrived here at the watch. And this is where you finally get to see that cool sort of Magitech aesthetic that the game advertises. It is a player hub area where you'll find lots of people running around going about their business, and there's a bunch of vendors that sell even more recipes for an even higher tier of currency. I'm looking at the prices, I'm ready to burst into tears at the thought of grinding more events, but then the game introduces me to a new activity. Hurrah, something else to do. Vaults, they're called. I did hear about these. I heard that they involve more players and more puzzle solving. This ought to be a bit more exciting. I then enter one, and what do I find? Well, vaults are just the same goddamn thing that I have already been doing for the last 25 hours. It's a series of randomly generated rooms with the same tile sets, the same puzzles, and a boss at the end that is also the exact same as its open world counterpart. The only difference is more people. These are public instances that you can kind of just jump in and out of, no matchmaking involved. Does having more people make this more fun? No, it does not. In fact, with 6 players, each bringing their own companion, the combat just devolves into utter chaos. Everyone's just swinging wildly, the enemy AI doesn't stand a chance, just a mess of character models and health bars. And again, at the end, once you've killed the boss, don't expect any cool new recipe or something. It's just more currency so that you can buy the exact recipes you want. I've done 2 of the 3 vaults. The forest one just bricks every time because some of the enemies spawn in the walls, so we can't finish the objective. But otherwise, I mean, all 3 of these, they're the exact same. You just mindlessly kill mobs, separated by some very light puzzle solving. Turns out though, there's another way to farm this new tier of essence. I speak to an NPC and she tells me that I can get some from the Ascended realms. Ooh, what's that, I thought? Special open world areas with some crazy modifiers? She hands me an Ascended Antiquarian card. Now the first difficulty card you unlock is called the Antiquarian. Oh no. They haven't. They've done it again. They want me to progress through the same 4 difficulties in the same 3 realms all over again, but with a higher gear score. And now instead of dungeons to unlock the cards, you just buy them. It's at this point the game officially broke me. I went on to farm enough currency for one of the best weapons in the game. I finally bought the recipe, I crafted it, upgraded it, slapped a spell on it, but I was not ready to repeat this rodeo for the rest of my gear. I was done. So, on paper, the idea of a survival game merged with an MMO light sounds pretty cool. You know, you've got your own little home that you can come back to upgrade and maintain your character, and then you've got some more challenging instanced content to jump into whenever you like with some randoms for some instant action. I mean, it's kind of up my alley. I can see it. I can see the vision. The reality of what's on offer here though is this. It's a game that takes the material grind of a survival game and combines it with the gear score grind of an MMO. The combat isn't nearly deep enough to support this grind, the crafting is incredibly arduous, and the storytelling isn't doing anything new either. Worst of all, that sense of discovery that is so core to this genre is just
absent here, which is especially disappointing for a game about jumping between magical Fey realms. There are some interesting ideas here, but they aren't nearly enough to shoulder just how rough the rest of the game is at the moment. As with all early access titles, it's sure to evolve over the course of its lifetime, and I'll be curious to see if it can fulfill that vision eventually. It won't be anytime soon though, I suspect. Perhaps the most dedicated fans of the genre will find enough here to buy in early and stick with this for the long road ahead, but with so many great survival games on offer lately, I would personally caution against it. Right now, I do not recommend Nightingale.
Every day, I feel lucky to do what I do. I was working a job I wasn't loving and eventually tried my hand at content creation. It worked, and all these years later, here I am. I was lucky for a lot of reasons, but one of the big reasons was that YouTube existed, and so there was this platform for me that I could use to turn my dream into a reality. What if the website you need to turn your hobby into a career doesn't exist? What if you want to sell the ceramics that you make or photos that you take? What if you want to provide physiotherapy to people in your local area or promote a stall you run at a weekend farmer's market? Whatever you want to do to build a business, having a website is generally going to be very helpful, and there's no better place to build a website than Squarespace. Squarespace offer intuitive but powerful website creation tools. Never made a website before? Then Squarespace is for you, letting you customize their beautiful templates in no time. Already feel pretty comfortable with web creation tools and want more advanced functionality? Well, Squarespace is for you too, with features like SEO, plugins for numerous payment platforms, a schedule tool allowing clients to book appointments, as well as detailed analytics allowing you to track how your website is performing. Since 2003, Squarespace has been helping people turn their dreams into reality. So if there's a passion that you'd like to make a career, then check out Squarespace for free by visiting squarespace.com. And when you're ready to get serious, use offer code SKILLUP at checkout for 10% off your purchase of a domain name. Thanks Squarespace for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.